Okay, so welcome to Who Does the Work? Preparing Workers for Technology Transition. This is an important discussion about technological change that is really affecting us all. To continue what has been already been discussed, on this panel we'll focus on the seismic shift that technology is bringing to the U.S. workforce and how organized labor and the use of collective bargaining can help workers and creative artists to navigate that transition. This is happening at a rapid pace. And organized labor is already mobilizing, developing strategies and infrastructure to help people minimize tech disruption, to mitigate job loss, and to create training programs. And our panelists are going to tell us a lot more about these strategies today. So please join me in welcoming Dee Taylor. Unite Here International President, who has devoted over 40 years to organized labor movement. Dee is launching a pioneering technology bargaining initiative, giving over 100,000 workers the ability to negotiate with their employers about technology and the workplace. And I'm looking forward to hearing more about that on this panel. Also join me in welcoming Randy Weingarten.
Hearing sweat.
Randy, you all know, is president of the American Federation of Teachers, leading over 1.7 million members. Before that, she served 11 years as president of the United Federation of Teachers, AFT Local 2, representing approximately 200,000 educators in the New York City public school system, as well as home child care providers and other workers in health law and education. And I'd like to welcome Tom Cohen. Hi, Tom. Tom is the George Maverick Bunker Professor Emeritus at the MIT Sloan School of Management and a faculty member of the MIT Institute for Work and Employment Research. His work has involved updating America's work and employment policies, institutions, and practices, and we're going to hear more about that on this panel as well. So we're going to try to have a short conversation, and then I'm also going to try to allow time at the end for some questions so that our experts can hopefully answer as many questions that you have as we can. So Dee, we're going to start with you.
Okay.
In your bio, we just mentioned that you have the technology bargaining campaign. Would you tell us what motivated this campaign and how it works?
Basically CES. I came here 6 years ago, saw that obviously a lot of our industry was under threat of automation. We had no technology language in our contract here, or frankly in any of our contracts around the country. And so we decided that we needed to do that, but we had to go through a process of explaining it to our leaders and then to our members, and then making sure our members understood not only the threat, but the opportunity. And it was a process. Our members got it pretty quickly because they deal with technology every single day. And then obviously that's spread outside of just the casinos and hotels and food service. We've been dealing with really the rapid introduction of technology in airports for quite some time. But in almost all our negotiations, almost the very last issue to settle, if they settle before a strike, is on technology, because it's about jobs, money, and opportunity. I would just say that one of the things that was important for us is to actually have a team really focus in on this, monitor this, and deal with this and work with our local leaders and employers, because in the past, we are the last box that gets checked by employers generally, where the horse is already out of the barn. So obviously, getting the kind of contract language introduction beforehand was very good for us. And frankly, we sort of lucked into it. Lucked into it just because walking through the CES show, you understand that there's a lot of money involved to try to replace you. So that's really why it came about. I wish I could say it's some grand, brilliant design, but it wasn't. It was both luck and fear, putting
Now,
those two together.
but now you're at CES seeing all of these innovations firsthand, but some of these that maybe not all of your members have even seen or are aware of yet. How do you communicate these ideas to them and let it be known why this is important to be addressing at this time?
Well, that's a good question. We invited all our affiliate leaders from around the U.S. and Canada, and we had over 50 here. They've been going through CES. We did a debrief actually yesterday. They were here this morning. Most of them are back at CES this afternoon. And then we're having an overall leadership meeting later this month in Houston, Texas. And a big part of that is going to be about not only CES, but the kind of technologies they have seen and what that means for us, because we have to evolve too. We're proud of the language we negotiated, but if you don't deal with what's ahead of you or what's going to be ahead of you, you just fall behind. So we felt very strongly that our leaders had to see it firsthand. And we feel very strongly that as many of videos, et cetera, that can be shown about the technology to our members, they will get it too. So it's not only having verifiers, we actually want to show the stuff that the companies put out to sell their product, which, they never talk about workers. They talk about how you can do it without workers. So we think that's very, very important.
Randy, you've also been at CES and seeing what's on the horizon. What is your vision of the foreseeable future, and how are you preparing your members?
That's a big question. Okay, so I want to actually split it up into two things, which is let's talk about kind of school conditions and what technology is now doing in terms of schooling. The second piece is just like what Dee just said, what we need to do as schooling. So it's really what we need to do as education and training. And that's one piece. And the second piece is, how technology interfaces with the conditions of school teachers. And, just like in every other industry that's represented here, and I talk about education not as an industry, but as a public good. But just like every other one, there was a period of time, for us, it was, about 20, 30 years ago. It is pretty remarkable to have one of my professors sitting right next to me. If you ever want to be nervous, have someone who taught you on the same battle. But so so there was a big attempt at replacing and displacing school teachers with technology. The School of One in New York City, as Michael Mogul said earlier, was attempted to be, we need one teacher for 150 kids, and it ended up becoming one teacher for every 15 kids because of the nature of the work and the nature of the engagement. But the ed tech sector thought that they would really displace teachers with ed tech. And, as I've said over the course of the last 24 hours, fast forward to the pandemic, and there was a resounding no to tech replacing teaching and learning. And so my membership has gone through all of that in both ways. They actually, every single rank and file teacher in the United States of America, frankly, the world, when school shut in March 2020, it's not like school systems had a plan to say, okay, this is what happens when you go to remote education. Everybody made it up in any way they could. And as Sarita said in the last panel, the inequities got exacerbated Because in places where kids did not have devices at home, what were they using? They were using, how do you do school on a little device like this, as opposed to the computer that you're using? So, and then how do you have the internet when, when it costs for high-speed internet, at least in my neighborhood, $250 a month? Who can afford that? If you're a kid in a family that's wrestling to actually be, just make ends meet. So there's that whole area. People are engaged in it. They've gone through it. And so the whole issue that we've been talking about for the last the last 24 hours about having a voice, centering that work, ensuring that some of these standards are met, issues like privacy, surveillance. In the HIPAA world, we are supposed to keep the privacy of our patients. But in the education world, we need to do the same thing. And it's violated all the time now. So there's lots of different issues that we have to be engaged and involved in lots of different ways. But the membership is very involved and engaged in that. That's one sector. The other piece, though, which I think is we haven't talked about as much, which is that, and again, I raised this yesterday. Any of us who went to CES in the last 24 hours, you think about what it is, and I'm a high school social studies teacher and a lawyer. What do we still teach in school in terms of mathematics and in terms of science? We teach biology, chemistry, physics. We teach algebra, geometry, probability, calculus, trigonometry. You think about what we saw. The advanced technology, the quantitative analytics. We need to actually change in terms of schooling so that the schooling we do in high school, junior high school and high school, is much more aligned with that kind of technology today so that kids are much more facile with it, which means we have to be much more facile with it. And that's what I get when I'm at CES. The human element, as Ben just said earlier, is so important, but we have to ready ourselves and our kids to actually be able to use technology as a tool. And the last thing I'll say is what will never be substituted for are relationships and critical thinking. What I learned from CES is that critical thinking is now more important. Machines can do all the stuff that we used to do in our times table. What machines will never replace us with is the human element and critical thinking. I don't know if I answered your question.
Brilliantly. Tom, we're going to talk a little bit later about your recommendations, but first, I know you brought an example about the importance of the intersection of technology and labor, a very recent example that I think everybody in the room is well aware of. What happened at Southwest Airlines?
Yeah, well, first of all, I want to say thank you for the invitation. This is fantastic. This goes way beyond any of my expectations or dreams for how labor and workers can have a stronger voice in technology. The fact that everyone that I've heard today is singing from the same page and the same hymn about the need for involvement at all stages. And that's going to be the theme that I'm going to develop. That's what I teach. That's what I've been studying about the future of work. We've demonstrated that you get the best technological returns in terms of innovation and productivity when you engage workers in this process and you integrate the technology with the way in which work is done. And who knows how to do that better than the workers? Because as the Japanese saying goes, it's workers who give wisdom to these machines. And your point, Randy, about the importance of critical thinking, all of the evidence in the research community now, not stuff I do, but stuff I work with colleagues who are doing this, is that as technology advances, the social skills become more valuable and more important in workplaces than before. And so they're complements. But let me tell, Southwest actually said, I'm a faculty member. I'm used to speaking for 52 minutes, right? Southwest saved you from all of that because I can't think of a better example of how a company screwed up an absolutely good labor management relationship, a good working relationship in coordination of people on the front lines, and their relationship with customers and what happened at Southwest in the last week or so when they essentially collapsed and shut down, leaving people stranded over the holidays. Now, I wrote with two colleagues who work on this with me, an op-ed on this because I was really irritated by most of the pundits who were analyzing this. And they said, well, yeah, it was an IT failure. The IT broke down. Of course it broke down. But then they said, well, then the obvious solution is management should fix the IT. Absolutely wrong, because if you don't engage workers, then you're not going to fix the IT. And in fact, it was the pilots union and the flight attendants union at Southwest that had raised concerns about that IT system for a number of years, and there was no response. A lot of talk about doing something, but no response. And so it was the lack of worker voice in the early stages of the strategy around technology is the fundamental problem at Southwest. Now, Southwest is a company that we've touted over the years. They're the most highly unionized airline. They have been on lists for the best company to work for. They have had good partnerships with their various unions. They have had consistently high profits and reached at the top of the list in customer satisfaction. But all that was declining over the last 3 years or so because the labor management relationship was going in the tank. The pilots had a lot of problems on staffing. The flight attendants are in mediation right now. It's taking them longer to reach agreements. And so what the problem was there is that, yes, the technology broke down because they didn't listen to the workforce. The relationships that they had at the workplace for coordinating activity to get the planes out was breaking down because of the decline in attention to the workforce. And so it's the interaction of those three things that needs to be fixed. And the way they have to fix it is, yes, they've got to fix the technology, but they've got to bring workers and their representatives into the earliest stages of saying, what is the problem we're trying to solve? What kind of new technology should we use? How can we make this work? How do we integrate it with the way in which we do work? How we get these planes turned around so quickly to make our business model work? And what do we need on the front lines in order to make that happen? And the only way they can get that is by bringing workers' voices, because they do have the wisdom to know how to design that technology with the specialists. Of course, you need the technical specialists, but the best IT people today now do bring workers in, but they've got to have a management structure that allows them to do that. I think what we should be doing right now as a labor movement, as people who care about this, is we should all be calling for Southwest to bring the workers into this process, bring the unions into this process, and we'll solve this problem together. So that's why Southwest saved you from a 50-minute lecture.
Well, I'd like all of you actually to elaborate on training and preparation. And Tom, maybe this is a good time for you to just, continue. And I know, I think you covered some of it in your example, but are there other aspects of your strategy that you'd like to
Yeah,
discuss?
I teach an online course at MIT on bringing worker representatives into technology decision-making. And this is a partnership with the Technology Institute and with both of my colleagues and friends here who were good enough to do interviews for this course. And that course is built around these very basic principles that you've been talking about today. And I think we need to consolidate our knowledge on this, and we need to get that material out to more people in the labor movement. And it starts with the first principle. It's 4 principles. The first one is you have to really know what problem we're trying to solve with the technology. And who knows the problems well? Well, the people who are experiencing how the work is done and interacting with customers directly. But that's where workers and their representatives need to be involved right up front before there's any design decisions in discussing what are the problems and what are the problems that kept us from getting those planes in the air over the holidays, and let's fix that and let's use the technology to fix it. The second is this design process. Typically, there's a sequential process. Some IT specialist or some vendor comes up with some great solution. They bring it to the executives. They say, okay, we'll buy that technology. We'll start to implement it. And then somewhere along the line, the human resource and labor relations people are asked, well, do we have the right skills? That's too late. And then people resist it because they haven't had a voice. We've learned from lots of research, when you integrate the technology design and the work process together in those early stages, that's when you get the best of both worlds in terms of innovation, acceptance, and better quality jobs. So number one, participate in the definition of the problem. Number two, have this integrated design with workers involved in it. And then, yes, of course, we have to have training. But the key point about training is you have to train before the technology hits the door. Because at that time, it's too late. I'm already stressed if I see the technology threatening my job. I don't have time to learn something new, and I'm not of a psychological mindset to do so. So we have to really look forward, and we see this. We've seen it in work with our German counterparts, with works councils, where they have worked in the auto industry to bring in new technologies at least a year, sometimes 2 years ahead of time. Just think of what we've got coming with electric vehicles in autos. Now is the time for really discussing how is that going to change the work structure, the process. It's going to affect lots of jobs. What are the new skills, and how do we get them before we have widespread, and we're already seeing this in some places, application. So training is important for sure. And then fourth, and this is something that everybody in this room has a lot more experience than I do on the front lines, and that is, obviously, we do have to have adjustment policies. We have to worry about, as the Unite Here agreements do, about severance pay, about retraining opportunities, about access to new jobs that are being created, and transfer rights, and all of the associated income supports for people who are adversely affected. So I want to encourage us to have that kind of coordinated 4-point strategy that we take into every application of technology in our organizations. We also need, as Liz emphasized, to be involved in those early stage governmental decisions around investments in technology. And the same principles apply there as Liz mentioned. They need to have a seat at that table as well. So I think the message is these early stage issues are ones that are a little bit more frontier issues for us in the labor movement, for union representatives. They don't tend to think about their role there because maybe they feel they don't have the expertise. I don't think anyone should be modest about the expertise that they bring. And in those areas, I think that's the frontier that I hear people talking about at this conference, and it gives me a lot of faith in the future.
So we started a little bit late, and I know Randy has to run to a flight shortly, so I want to go back to you if you have anything you'd like to add on this topic, and then we'll go to questions, because I imagine some people would like to ask you questions before you leave.
Sure. I wanted to actually just kind of comment on something earlier today about the nature of the algorithm. And I'm going to actually tweet something that shows just how crazy it is if you don't do the stuff that Tom just said, which is that about 10 years ago, even Democratic administrations in evaluating teachers based upon test scores, and that they could reduce everything to an algorithm. One of those algorithms were actually, we sued on 2 of those algorithms. And I'm just going to tweet as we're talking, because I can't put it up here. If I put it up here, you will see it. But we couldn't, I thought of it too late, unfortunately. But you'll see just how everything that Tom just said why people would get into a crouch position and think this is nuts. Education is about all these things, relationships, human being, experiential learning, all of that. You can't actually reduce all of that to an algorithm that gets assessed that way. And I think that part of it is it's easy for us to rail against the negativity, like I just did, and I'm going to show you the negative impacts and effects of technology. It's much, much harder for us to be in the fight and in the trenches to both problem solve, harness, and navigate, as we have been trying to say today. And I think we as a labor movement will help each other and help create more of a help create a better society if we take this on as a labor movement, as we've been trying to say all day long today. Just like, think about during the first few months of COVID, how important safety in the workplace was, and how it was the labor movement who was out there saying, yes, I mean, you've heard me say it, in-person learning is really important, but it had to be safe. How many times NNU was out there? How many times the UFCW and others? And I think based upon whether it's the 4 standards that Tom just outlined or all that we've heard today, what is it that we as a movement together can do to create confidence of our membership and our leadership that we can walk in and really center workers' voices in this transition?
Do we have one question for Randy before she has to leave? No questions yet. Okay, go right ahead, Pam.
Thank you so much. Randy, I just want to commend you on the work that you do to protect children, all the way up through high school and even into college and into CET careers. It is, you're doing God's work, as they say. It's a little bit of a cliche, but children are the next generation, and it has been so hard the last 3 years. What are you, AFT and others, thinking can be done to help pull children up from where they have, in many cases, they've fallen back? Nobody's fault. It's not parents, not teachers. It's just the world and the pandemic. Do you have any ideas on how you?
Yes.
Oh, good. Please tell me.
Yeah, we do. It's so first off, we have to get out of a defensive posture because what's happened is people are in great trauma right now. We've never been through what we were through for the last 3 years. I mean, just take Unite Here and everything that Unite Here had to go through. Like when virtually everyone that you represent is now laid off, what happens? So for us, we have to figure out proactively, and when Fox or others try to blame us for everything, you got to try to figure out how to shoo that off and just focus on what we need to do. What has happened so essentially we've had 3 years of disruption of life. And it's not simply learning loss. There are, for some kids, they learn very well this way. But the loss of relationships, the loss of playtime, I'm an asthmatic, I'm wearing a mask, hate it. But we did it to ensure that we could keep each other safe. So the loss of that community of thinking about ourselves as a community as opposed to ourselves as individuals. The level of anxiety and trauma, that's part of what we have to overcome. What we've learned is there's short-term and long-term solutions. One of the things that the American Rescue Plan pays for is the short-term solution of tutoring. Sometimes that works, sometimes that doesn't. The longer-term solutions, and we're part of it in lots of different places. The longer-term solution is we have to create confidence. We have to help people, particularly kids and their parents, get their mojo back. Get a sense of being able, instead of looking at this, and I'm doing this on purpose, I'm looking at you directly. Kids were looking at this. For the first few months when people got back to school in September 2021 to 2022, getting kids back to behaviors that they had learned with each other in kindergarten because they were like this. So we have to work on literacy. We have to work on career pathways so that people have a sense that there's a career in front of them or college in front of them. We have to have play and sports and all of these things so there's something to look forward to. And we have to wrap social emotional resources around schools. Those, I would say, the 4 things, and believe that within the next couple of years, our kids will get better. They will get better. I talk to teachers all the time this year. This year is a heck of a lot better than last year. People are looking at each other. There's more relationships. It's better. But it's not going to happen in a linear way given all the disruption that happened.
Dee, do you want to use that as a jump? Continue your work.
Well, it's tough to follow that. I would just say on job training, we learned a few things that we don't know that much about technology and job training, and I think partnerships have been important. Our partnership with Carnegie Mellon has been extremely helpful because I remember going there and they're showing us sort of technology about in the hospitality industry, which, you know, frankly, it's not like our companies are going to give that to us. But more importantly, helping us think about what we do with our own members and also our own proposals. I think that's extremely important. I think also important is understanding jobs have changed now. More and more people are working several jobs, and the question is, are they union? And can we provide the kind of tool that allow them to work in several different union places and get the benefits of that? And, you know, we partnered up, I know here in Las Vegas, it's spread with GoodWorks, which has been a key. It's on the phone. I mean, young people, they're not calling up and asking, is there a job available? And so we have adapted. I think that's extremely important. I think in training, I think others have said this, part of our training of the folks that we have coming into the industry, you know, everybody in this room, oh yeah, I know how to do this. I know how to do this on the computer. A lot of our folks, I don't care what classifications, housekeeping, kitchen workers, they do not, they don't have an email often. They don't know how to use an app. And so part of our training that we have is how to do things that can actually get you a job and can keep track of that. And finally, I just have to say this, particularly with our older members, our more senior members, when technology gets introduced, they view that as a minus as compared to a plus, generally, if we're not involved. I mean, and we have a team involved with that. And we have to deal with this in a confident way and not in a defensive way. Now, we have language in there, but more importantly, we have folks who have been, let's say, working on the job for 30 years, and so all of a sudden, new technology gets introduced, and they think that's a way to get rid of them. Often it's not. Often the customer likes that. But if we don't demand the training on that kind of stuff, it'll be tough to keep their job. So I think it's all those things, but I really think partnering with people who deal with training all the time, like I mentioned Carnegie Mellon, there's others. I know I went there with the AFL-CIO before, but we now have an ongoing relationship. I think trying to figure out the nature of work also and how people find out information. People do not, this is how young people find out information. This is how almost everybody finds out information. And trying to figure out, is there a way that you can meet people where they are, not where you want them to be. And in our case, we've been using GoodWorks, and I'm not here to promote them per se, but it's been a godsend, I think. So if somebody can work at the stadium, they can work over at CES show, pick up a job at the Mirage. They're all union jobs. They all get combined. So you can work in that kind of setting in a union way. So that's been a little bit what we've learned on the training bit. And we don't know anything. That's how we view it. And we just try to suck up and copy what others have done successfully and figure out how it applies or doesn't apply. But with a lot of the workers that that are our members, we cannot enter it that they're tech savvy to begin with. Obviously, younger people are generally, but even then, you're dealing with different languages and candidly different levels of education.
And do we have time for one question? Assuming that's a yes. Do we have one question? Okay. No, we answered all your questions?
Yeah, let me make one final comment to build on what Dee said, because I think it's really important. We've seen in companies and organizations and labor management relationships that we've studied, and I'll make one example at Kaiser Permanente in Southern California, where they've been opening up new clinics, and they have turned to the workforce to train the workforce. They brought in mentors in the early stages of the process. They followed some of these design principles of engaging people. They have a future of work committee that is a union management committee that helps to oversee these things. But they said, look, the work process in these new clinics as we design it are going to change. And there's going to be more interaction with computer technologies of various sorts, nothing radical, but it's going to add stress to some of the more senior workers. So they trained a cadre of young workers. And those young workers then did walkthroughs and learned how to change the technology a bit and shape it. But then they were the ones who trained their peers. And when those new clinics opened, they were the ones whose job was flexible enough. They were assigned the task of go and help. And it was worker to worker training that gave people the confidence that they could get it done. We can just empower more of the young workers who are more tech savvy. I turned to my teenage granddaughters to fix my technologies or to figure them out. That's a natural way to empower young workers, to make them leaders of the next generation labor movement, and to really demonstrate that they can help us all learn how to do this.
I'm afraid we're out of time, but thank you to our panelists and good to see everyone.
Thank you. Thanks. Thanks, Tom. Good to see you. Thank you.